This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
And welcome back, everybody. If you are a parent, even a grandparent, and of someone who has children in middle school or high school, and maybe you're considering a private school for them, there's a lot involved in that application process, selection, on and on and on. Got somebody today that's an educational consultant that can help you with that process right down to the interview. And we're going to get some more insight today from her. So great to have Erin Gevertz back on the program with us. How are you doing today?
Hey, Steve, I'm doing great. Thanks. How are you?
Really good. Really good. Great to have you back here. Since we last spoke, we got at least one email, and I'd love to dig into that to start. Would that be okay?
Let's go for it.
So you can reach us instantfeedbacksteve@gmail.com. Anytime you have a question, comment, whatever it might be. This is from Jen in Searsport, Maine, and she says, thank you for your conversation. Are there usually scholarships available to help with tuition costs for private schools?
Yeah, great question. And yes, typically there is financial aid available. So depending on the kind of school, it's not necessarily a scholarship where you're getting money from something else that you can use. Like I think of scholarships more for college, and
Mhm.
I don't do college. So
Maybe that's just the way she phrased it. I don't
yeah,
know.
absolutely. Yeah, I just
Sure.
so most schools when you go onto their admissions website, if you go to their school page, they'll have an admissions website that guides you through the process of how to apply to their school. And so you'll be able to see if there's something that says financial aid or tuition assistance, and read more there about what they offer and how it works. It's also worth a call. Some schools don't. Some schools do not offer any financial aid. And so if you don't see that there, it's definitely worth, reaching out to the school to confirm, do you offer, don't you offer, so that you don't spend your time applying to a school that doesn't make sense for your family financially.
Hmm. Deeper question on that. So, a lot of times, depending on your financial situation, the state can provide you with financial assistance. I hope that's true. That's, what I heard. I mean, certainly for college, that is offered there.
Yes.
Um, are there different guidelines for private schools for middle and high schoolers?
Yeah. As far as I know, the state, at least in California, with the schools that I've worked with, there's been no state funding to provide you that's been provided because typically the state funding is going into public
Public
education,
schools, right?
right?
Okay,
So you have the right to a free public education, and that's where that money is going.
gotcha.
If you're choosing to apply to a private school, then any money that's coming from a private school is coming from the school itself,
Got it.
typically. Unless it's the parochial school, they sometimes receive funding from the archdiocese, which helps to lower the cost of the private school, of the parochial school.
Got it. Okay. You know what? That makes it very clear, even for some parents that are thinking, well, maybe might be something available. No, it's got to
Yeah.
come from the school. Obviously, you need to have that conversation with
Yeah.
admissions at the school.
Yeah.
So
And I would
let's,
just say one more thing, like don't let
sure.
the price of a school scare you away from a school because they might have money, like you might qualify for a good amount of money. And if
Okay.
that's the case, then go for it.
Can't hurt to ask.
Can't hurt to ask. Yeah,
And while we're
exactly.
talking about admissions, application, I've heard that schools ask for parent guardian statements. What exactly is that?
Yeah. So that's the part of the application that a parent or guardian will write to talk about their child. Um, and if you're thinking about a kindergarten, there's mostly three entry points for schools. So kindergarten, middle school, and then high school. Um, Typically in kindergarten and middle school, the parent guardian statement, what you're writing about your child, matters more than it does. I mean, it still matters for the high school part, but by high school, your child is more grown, they're more autonomous, they have, they know themselves better, but that's the part that the parents write or guardians write for their child in their application process.
So those statements, how critical are they? I mean, do you really need to be extremely intentional in terms of what you write?
Yeah, I look forward to getting into that a little more today. So it's definitely worth being intentional and thoughtful about what you're putting in there. And you also want to be honest and truthful about what you're putting in the statement, because this is showing the schools, this is how well I know my child. And this is, you're able to explain your child's strengths and areas of growth from your perspective as the parent guardian.
This is one of those things where your value, there's no number on it. Because as a parent, if I was in that situation, yeah, I can boast about my child and I could go off, as we all, as parents,
Sure.
it could be a 40,000 page essay. Like,
Right.
where do you draw the line? What kind of information do you put in there? Where do you position it? I got nothing. So that's where I would call upon you for that. The application itself, that whole process, when we talk about the application, what is the most important part?
Yeah. I would generally say that the most important part is your child, right? So sometimes parents think that there's like a way to game the system if I put this in what I write or if
This is
my
what I'm talking about, Erin.
right.
Yeah. And not,
Yeah.
not, trying to be sly or anything, but like when you apply for a job, there's certain keywords that they look for. I'm not saying that this is how it's done, but
Sure.
those are certain words that trigger a certain response from those reading the application, if you will.
Right. And so it's worth noting, generally speaking, admission if I was in an admissions office, I might spend 20 or 30 minutes on your entire application, including, grades and test scores, parent statement, student statement, notes on an interview, a video if I require a video. So the whole thing, I don't have time to read your 40,000 page essay that you wrote on so lovingly on your child. So it is important that that we pare it down a little bit. And all of the parts matter. I think what's important across all the parts, the teacher recommendations, that there's kind of through lines through it all, right? So as a parent, if you're writing about how much your child loves to read and they go into the interview and they're like, I don't read, I just play video games. Look, it's an age appropriate thing for kids to play video games,
Uh-huh.
but I want you to be honest and authentic when you're writing about your student, so that it seems like you know your child and you're being honest and transparent about who they are because there's all kinds of great kids out there who are into all kinds of things.
Very clear. Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to paint a picture that's accurate.
Yes.
What's the starting point on that
Yeah.
whole application situation?
Yep. So just like the question that we answered earlier, there's on a school's website, they will have their step-by-step guide on how to complete their application.
Hmm.
So most important, it's important to notice due dates and make sure that you have those on your calendar and you're working backwards because a lot of parents are very busy with their own jobs and work and taking kids around. So making time for this, noting the due dates. I recommend for my clients, I actually make a document that has pretty much all the questions that I can find, all the different application questions, and I'll pass that along to you. So I think it can be helpful to have everything in one place, on a Word doc, a Google doc that you're able to then work from and edit and draft from. And we can work together on that. So yeah, I think just starting with looking at what's required of you and noticing the due dates is an important place to start.
Hmm. As we talked before, when you're applying for a job, there are
Right.
certain things you put in your resume or certain things you leave out because you should. And those keywords and such. Now your child, yeah, you're applying for a private school. How do you make them stand out? That application stand out. There's only so many that they accept for a private school. You want, of course, you want the best for your child. You want to go to the front of the line. What do we do?
Yeah. So I think it's important for parents um, to share anecdotal stories of their child that
Ooh,
help
okay.
bring that help to bring, these adjectives to life. You can write, my child is bright, my child is kind, my child is helpful. But if you're able to give short 2, 3 sentence examples that demonstrate what you're saying, that helps to paint a picture in the admission folks' mind of your child at home, of your child on the soccer field, of your
Hmm.
child, through lines from what you've heard from different teachers over the years of how they show up in the classroom, etc. So
Ooh.
the biggest thing that I recommend for parents is to start by, noting different characteristics and qualities, and also making sure, do it on it, get going with this on a day that you've had a good day with your kiddo. Kids are kids. And so if you're having a moment, maybe don't start on that day. Maybe wait till you're having a better day. And start to think about characteristics you want to highlight, and then stories that you can use to show those.
Like, for example, let's say your child is motivated or thinking about maybe becoming a veterinarian, right? And maybe you might include a story that your child last year volunteered for a shelter and helped construct beds for cats and dogs. 2 sentences, something, just put it in there. It's why wouldn't you? It's
Right.
but honestly, until you mentioned it, Erin, I wouldn't even think of that.
Right.
Not that I forget it, but I would not think that that would be something that belongs in the application. Fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. And,
Hmm.
and if it was a younger kid, my child helps to take care of our cats, right? You're showing responsibility at home. They clean the litter box. They have their responsibilities that they do.
Yep.
Um, they take our dog for walks around the park without prompting, that kind of a thing. Yeah.
What are there essential things in the application that you make sure you have them in there?
Absolutely. And so I recommend for families, I do have a longer video. If you look at my YouTube page, there's a couple longer videos with more explanation for all of this. So do check that out if this seems of interest to you. But a couple of highlights to consider that you definitely want to include. And one suggestion on how to get started, because sometimes getting started is the hardest part, because you have 13 years of your kid that you want to highlight. So sometimes just doing what I like to call a brain dump, and just starting to like get it all down there, and then later you can go back and organize it and make it nice. So
Okay.
I think this brain dump should include things about a child's personality, right? Their character traits, um, and talking about how do they show up. How do they show up in their community, in your church, with their friends, in the sports, in their arts, etc. That's certainly worth highlighting.
Mm.
I think it's also worth noting kind of through lines that you've seen with school, with academic interests, areas of strength, and also areas of growth. A lot of, well, at least here in the Bay Area, there is a very specific question about what are the areas of strength of your child. And then there's also this year a very specific question about areas of growth. And sometimes people are hesitant to talk about, weaknesses or challenges that their kids are going through. But the truth is, see, we all have areas that we can be improving on, even as adults. And so I think there's ways to talk about those and to frame those, that you can talk. So you want to share consistency across the grades, that will match what other people are talking about. Two other things to include. One is like co-curricular interests. So if your child plays on a club soccer team, maybe they're the captain of the team, or they've been committed to this for so long.
Yep.
And here's how they manage homework load and playing soccer 3 days a week. That kind of time management or something might be worth highlighting. And then sometimes schools will ask a question about, why are we a good fit for you? Why do you like our particular school? And so, in that case, you want to highlight the school environment, right? What about the environment of that school, the way the classes are taught, the way the classrooms are set up, where the projects the kids are doing? What kinds of things are you noticing when you're visiting that you believe aligns with how your student will thrive in their environment?
I would imagine if you can't answer that question, then you shouldn't be applying.
That's a good point.
Just
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
If you're
Yeah.
struggling with that, well, I'm not really sure that no. move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Um, when you're doing your research, should you be looking at things like tutoring, homework help, um, after school activities, enrichment, and things like that?
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's important, depending on the grade level. Um,
Mm,
if you're looking at middle schools, I believe hopefully kids are getting to try so many different things in a middle school because that's really a time of like discovering passions and interests that you don't know about. It could theater, arts, sports, music, etc. And in high school, I believe it's important to be able to try new things too, even though some interests might be a little bit more formed or kind of formulated. Um, so yeah, so looking at the co-curriculars that schools offer, super important. What else did you mention?
some of the activities,
Oh, yes.
homework
Yeah.
help, things like that.
Yeah, a lot of schools are, at least here in the Bay Area, are starting to modify their schedule. Like I was visiting a school the other day, and they were talking about how in the beginning of the first semester of ninth grade year, as one of their seven classes, and they don't have all seven classes every day, but one of their seven classes, students are given a planned study hall. So all ninth graders are in study hall twice a week as of, 1 or 1.5 hours, and they're learning how to study, they're getting focused, they're getting homework done at school. So looking at a school's schedule, is really important. Talking about office hours. And those are also
Mm,
great things that schools will tell you about themselves. But when you're visiting a school, great questions to be asking kids who are there, right? What happens if you get stuck with something? Are your teachers available? How does that work here? Because
mm.
hopefully your child will be challenged in their new school environment, and then there'll be folks and scaffolding there to support them.
Let's go to, and you just opened the door, I believe, to this. The questions you should be asking. The questions you should, like, for example, discipline. How do they handle certain situations? It's one of those things that as a parent, you don't really want to think of because my child's not going to need that.
Mhm.
But I think we need to be mindful of that. That question, others, what are some things that you really want to keep on your radar?
Yeah, great. Yes. How does the school handle discipline? I've had families tell me, I want my child to go to a school where there's no bullies. And
Good luck with that, by the way.
that sounds nice. Yeah. And so part of that screening happens during the admissions process, right? Generally speaking, schools are looking for nice, kind, thoughtful kids to come into their community. And that said, kids are kids and they make mistakes. So another question to consider is how does a school handle when there's been harm caused in the community, right? How does a school handle conflict among students, which is inevitable? And I think it's an important thing that kids are learning in school. How do I handle conflict? Can I apologize when I make a mistake and own up for my mistakes, right?
Mm.
So that's definitely something to consider. We talked about homework help. If I'm struggling, that's a great question to ask. Let me look at my list here. Sometimes kids want to play a particular sport or do a particular thing. I know for me, I went to a high school that was very competitive for theater when I was a freshman, and I did not make the play, and I was really sad.
Mm.
It's part of the reason why I like switched high schools my sophomore year was because even though I wasn't that good at it, that's what I wanted to be a part of, right? So how hard is it to make the team or the play or whatever? Great things to wonder.
Erin, did you say that you switched schools in high school because of theater?
It was partially because of theater and
Wow.
partially because of I wanted like to be around new people. A lot of the folks from my same middle school went to this high school, and I was like ready for something new and different. So yeah, that
Hmm.
was
Cool.
part of that. Um, let's see what else. Oh, the opportunities, like you were saying, you want kids to try new things. I think it's great to ask kids about different projects that they've done. If you know your child really loves hands-on learning and getting involved with stuff, can you tell me about a project that you did? How does grading work here? Assessments? I also think it's
Hmm.
important to ask the hard questions, like, what would you change about this school? Or is there something you don't love about this school? Like, I think sometimes people shy away from hard questions because they're afraid it's going to seem not great. But there's a way to ask hard questions respectfully that you want to make sure you get all your answers before you
Yeah.
apply.
You can even ask that question in a loving way.
Yeah,
It's not like they're being grilled. It's not like an interrogation.
don't interrogate.
Just say, by the way, if you could change anything, but what do you think it would be around here? What do you
Yeah.
think?
And one thing for asking questions, I tell all my students bring a notebook, right? You want to write down the answers to these questions. And a lot of these questions, especially if you're applying to high schools and parents too, ask the same questions across different schools. Because then you start to be able to compare and contrast the answers. If there's a particular program at a school, of course, ask about that. But some of these questions are general enough you can ask across schools and then compare their answers.
How about while you're checking out the school, maybe you're talking to the administrators and everything, should you at least schedule some FaceTime with guidance counselors, psychologists, other specialists within the school?
If your child is on a 504 plan or has an IEP
Hmm.
and they have learning differences, and you want to make sure that the school will be able to support them and learn about what support looks like in a school, yes, it definitely makes sense to chat with like a learning specialist or somebody at the school, or talk to other families of kids who have, ADHD or dyslexia or something, to be able to like talk to them about their experience at the school and feeling supported. Um, I think if you want to talk to a particular coach or somebody, I definitely recommend reaching out to the admissions team and say, my child's really interested in this thing. Can you please put us in touch with the coach? And
Sure.
then let the admissions team make that introduction for you.
Lots we talked about here today, all good, like all different directions of vital information if you want to seek out or apply to a private school. Final tips, anything floating out there that you want people to know, they should know?
Yeah, I think in general with the parent statement, I encourage people to work smarter, not harder, right? You can use some of the same answers across different schools, right? There might be some similarities. So
Sure.
so that is definitely one tip. I say to avoid repetition. Often this happens with the students, but parents, you don't need to continue repeating yourself to make your point over and over. So that's one thing. You want to be honest and genuine and authentic in your statements. And oh, one more. If your child has had major discipline issues or something happened at the school and you're tempted to just hide it under the rug, it might come up in a different part of the application. And so it's better for you, the parent, to briefly address it in what you're writing, and talk about how your child, the positive lesson that's come out of this,
Hmm.
so that if it does come up, then you're like, no, we addressed it. And, my kid made a mistake and they've grown from it. And here's where we are.
Well,
Um,
I got uneasy when you said, if there's a disciplinary situation to include it. I was like, ooh, but taking the positive spin
yes.
equalizes it and it's all good. I do want to point out when we talked last that you do a mock interview, an interview process, which is really important. I never realized it even with a private school. Don't you do some kind of workshop too?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm working on a workshop coming up, and you can find the information on my website, eringevertz.com/workshops. And I'm working with a friend who previously was an admissions director at one of these schools here in the Bay Area.
Hmm.
And so he'll be teaching a lesson, and then we'll be doing some mock interviews for students. And so this is a great opportunity for anyone, even if we're not going to work one-on-one, folks across the country can reach out and get this support and get practice for your student. Primarily, it's for kids. Most interviews happen for kids applying to high school. So if you have an eighth grader who's looking at schools this year, and you want them to have practice talking about themselves, bragging about themselves, which is part of the process and feels a little weird, we do a 40-minute lesson, and then you get one-on-one 30-minute mock interview with some immediate feedback.
Fantastic. I didn't know that that was that important, but certainly offering that just especially for your child, it's an uneasy for most to be in an interview like that. Plus, you want them to show their best side,
Yeah, and
and
feel
brag
confident. Feel
and feel
confident with
confident.
themselves.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Your website is your name, right?
Yes,
ErinGevertz.com. Do I have that right?
that's it. Yep.
Excellent. You're in the Bay Area. You can help anybody anywhere virtually. Erin, thank you so much for all the tips today. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, have a great day.
You too.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.